And so I flew London, Prague, Moscow, Kabul, Delhi. If you lose your job, you might die because you might not be able to eat. People are people everywhere. If you walk into a room with an open heart.
So at some point you just need to be good, and it will help you to adapt to any culture, right?
You are not from that country. UK adults not accessing the products and services they need. It was an expensive learning, but there's no bad learning.
Yeah. Our guest today is Gregor Mowat, ex-KPMG partner, and nowadays founder and CEO of Fintech startup Loqbox. So, Greg, you were born in Scotland and you live in many countries during your career. So, tell a little bit about yourself, about your past, and how did you manage all of this? How you were a partner and then a founder? But briefly, just tell us your background, please.
Fantastic. Well, I was, as you rightly said, I was born in Scotland in a town called Ayr, and I grew up there. My father had an accountancy business, and I joined that accountancy business. So I studied English literature at university, and that was the natural route into becoming an accountant, or not. But I trained. It's quite common in the UK that people do non-vocational degrees and then switch into a vocation subsequently. So I trained as an accountant, which gave me a great background in understanding business. After a few years with my father's firm in a small town in Scotland, I realised that I would really prefer to work with bigger business. And I also knew that it would hurt him tremendously if I switched to a different accounting firm in Britain. So I thought maybe I'll look overseas. And at that time, the BRICS were very much the economic flavour of the month. So I had the great good fortune of finding a vacancy at KPMG in Brazil. And that ticked a number of boxes for me because I wanted to learn a foreign language. I've always been interested in languages, and I also wanted to make the transition from a small business to a big business. So that took me into KPMG and into moving around overseas. And then I had a career overseas before I moved back to the UK in 2016. And at that point, I had built enough experience. I'd built some capital. And that gave me the opportunity to think about switching into something more entrepreneurial. And I have to make a small correction, actually. I'm not the CEO, I'm the co-CEO.
Co-CEO,
sorry. And that really matters because one of the crucial things in the change to the entrepreneurial life for me was having a fantastic business partner to share the burden, or the entrepreneurial burden, which can be very heavy sometimes. And my partner, Tom Ayre, had already built a business called Credit Improver, which was a predecessor to business to Loqbox, and I invested into that initially as an investor rather than as a co-founder, into this business that Tom had started in 2012, which was the first ever pure credit building business in the UK. And so I worked with him for half a year, during which time we realized that there were some elements of the financial inclusion credit building problem that Credit Improver was not solving for. And at that point, we had the idea for Loqbox, which was, again, a successor business in the same space, but really quite a different business. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we looked each other in the eyes and we said, okay, if we're going to go on with Loqbox, let's do this together. Let's co-found this and work together as partners. And we did that, and we've been doing that ever since.
Mm-hmm. It's really great. We'll dive deeper into a partnership and into the topic of Loqbox and how you founded it. Mm. I want to talk a little bit more about your experience abroad. So, as I understood, you started working abroad from the beginning. So you found an open position at KPMG Brazil. Yeah, so you started working in Brazil from the scratch. Yeah, so it was your first job. Yeah.
My first job after leaving my father's accountancy firm.
After leaving the
first. So I'd been working for about 4-5 years by the time in my father's accountancy practice, I'd qualified as a chartered accountant, and I worked my way up to manager with that business, and then I moved over to KPMG in Brazil.
And it's a big step, yeah, for a lot of people, especially like in the UK. I guess a lot of people just living in the UK whole life, yeah, and do not go anywhere abroad, only for vacation. And you decided to do this huge step, yeah, to move to another country. Have you always wanted to try to live into another country?
I hadn't formulated the idea of always wanting to live in another country. However, when I was 18 and left school, I had the great good fortune of not getting into the university of my choice, which meant that I had a year to think about what to do while I reapplied to university. And as part of that, I went to I joined an organization called the GAP organization, which organizes, they call it gap years, a gap year between school and university. And the GAP organization was structured to help people who were 18 in a kind of fairly safe way to travel overseas. And I applied for the remotest posting in the GAP postings worldwide, which was to teach in a school in Nepal in northwest of Kathmandu in the Helambu region. And that was a transformational experience for me, because I went away at 18, and I'd never been away myself before for an extended period of time, maybe for a short vacation with a friend, but never we went for 4 months, and to get there in the cheapest way possible, I flew with Ariana Afghan Air, which
Wow.
during one of the brief periods that there was cessation of fighting in Afghanistan during the difficult years they've had since the Soviet invasion, really. And so I flew London, Prague, Moscow, Kabul, Delhi, then took a train from Delhi to Lucknow, then the bus from Lucknow to Kathmandu.
Wow.
And from Kathmandu, I took a bus to the Malamshi Bazaar, which at those days was the end of the road. And then I walked up a hill for a day, and I stayed in Shermatang village, which with no electricity, no running water. There's an amazing school for the Yolmu people who lived there, and I had the incredible good fortune to be able to teach these beautiful, wonderful children for three months up there, and that transformed my view of the world. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to kind of see as much of the world as I could.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just wow. And you were teaching English, yeah?
No, actually, the kids all spoke rudimentary English. I taught some English, but I was actually teaching standard elementary school
Just standard
subjects.
program, yeah?
Yeah, standard program, but I was teaching in English, yeah. Yeah, and they were teaching me how to play carom board and various other things, which is great fun.
I've also been to Kathmandu and to Nepal as a tourist. It was a great experience because I've never seen a life like this. Probably back in the days, you were in the 90s, yeah?
It was actually just the 90s, yeah, 1991.
1991, yeah, beginning of the 90s. Yeah, I've been in 2018, and it has already been like a travel back in time, like traveling back in time to probably 90s. Yes, these days when I was. And for you, it was probably like a travel back in time to 50s or 70s, I don't know. And you say that your mindset completely changed. So what shifted in your mindset after traveling to Nepal? What have you seen? What affected you so much?
So, lots. Just seeing the wide world and seeing how different everything was, and how cultures are so different, but also understanding how incredibly fortunate you are if you've won the lottery of life and been born into Western Europe. I mean, that where of course there's poverty, there's lots of poverty, lots of difficulties, and our business is helping to address actually some of those exact problems. But it's a different level in the emerging markets where you may or may not have access to a toilet. You may or may not have running water in your house. If you lose your job, you might die. Because you might not be able to eat. So I mean, there's and that was certainly the case back in the late 80s, early 90s. I think for a lot of the world, it's still the case now. So seeing that was it broke a paradigm in my head where I lived this very privileged life, and I was able to teach, which was and this was a rural farming community where there was constant pressure by the parents to take the children out of school and help in the fields. And in fact, I travelled with a friend from Edinburgh who has also lived a kind of similar parallel life. He went into the Foreign Office, and his name's Fergus Auld. He's currently the ambassador to Azerbaijan for the UK. And we ended up living in certain countries at the same time together with children of the same age. So we've had a very parallel life. But he invested... I remember for 1 week, he went round to one family's house every single day because they wanted to take their child out of school. And he went round and he persuaded them gently that it's worth the sacrifice of the time in the field. And that boy, I met him actually in the UK about a year ago, grew up to become the first ever doctor to come out of that village.
From this community?
From that community. And all because my friend sat and convinced them of the power of education.
So he changed his life completely.
Changed his life. He also changed the life for the village because he's gone back and he's set up medical practices all throughout the valley. And then in the recent, not so recent now, a couple of years ago, there was some terrible earthquake and water slides, and he helped to coordinate the rescue efforts and all of the stuff to kind of remediate that, all because he's in that position because he stayed at school.
It's really tremendous story, because I guess these stories, they should be turned into movies or into books.
Very inspirational.
When you hear the stories, you can't even believe that such people can exist. Yeah, it's really makes you believe in kindness and humanity in the future. Yeah, that's really great. And after Nepal, you got into the university, and afterwards Brazil, as I understand. Yeah.
So after university, then training with my father's firm, and then Brazil.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And after Brazil, there were a lot of other countries. Yeah, can you share where you have lived after the Brazil?
So I was overseas from 1999 until 2016. 1st of January 1999, not first, rather 6th of January 1999, I landed in Brazil. And that was a very interesting experience because the Brazilian real had been pegged at 1.2 to the dollar during the late 80s. This was 1994. So it was pegged. Apologies. 1999. During the middle of the 90s, it was there was a real plan from 1994 to 99, and it was pegged to the dollar. And then they removed the peg on the 13th of January. So I suddenly watched my earnings disappearing as the real went from 1.2 to 3 to 1.
I can relate.
I think I can understand that. I can also relate for the Russia story too. And then from there, I left KPMG and I worked for HSBC for 2 years as an international manager. I was based in Hong Kong. They sent me to Hong Kong. So that was interesting. That took me into financial services, out of kind of more industrial related consulting and audit. And so I was 2 years in Hong Kong. At the end of that, I rejoined KPMG in Thailand. And it was in Thailand. So this was now 2003. The bottom of the post-1997 crash in Asia. So things were just about to start recovering again. But it was an interesting time to be doing business in Asia. And so I was there from 2003 to 2006, and it was there that I became a partner in KPMG. So that was a kind of seminal moment for me. I became a partner in the mergers and acquisitions due diligence team. I then left KPMG Thailand and went following one of the big global clients, Standard Chartered. It had bought a bank, fourth or fifth largest bank in Korea, First Bank. And that was a huge part then of the Standard Chartered Group's assets. I think it was more than 50% of the total assets of the group. And so the London partner asked me to go there to look after that client relationship. We were the auditor globally for Standard Chartered. So I went and looked after the audit in Korea of Standard Chartered First Bank and then the other big KPMG clients like HSBC, etc. So that took me to Korea for 2 years, which was absolutely fascinating. So it was 2 years in Seoul, and from there, I had the option to potentially come back to the UK, but instead I was. The storm clouds of the financial crisis, or the 2008 financial crisis, were gathering. So if you were working in financial services, you could sense that all was not well. Things were slowing down, so I didn't fancy coming back to the UK and being last in, first out if things went wrong. So at that point, I was looking for an opportunity, another opportunity, but where I could participate in the management of a firm. And I was introduced to the managing partner of the Russia CIS business, who had a space open for somebody to come and help to set up or develop a financial services practice in Kazakhstan, where we were the smallest of the big four in terms of that sector and segment. So I went there and I had a bit of good fortune in so far as the financial crisis landed. So it might seem counterintuitive that was good fortune when I was trying to set up a financial services practice, but the worst thing that can happen to you in an industry that is very steady, like the Big Four, is nothing, is complete stability, because then nothing changes.
Nothing's happening, yeah.
So yeah, and in Kazakhstan, it was like a little microcosm of the UK, where two of the top four banks effectively went bust and were then nationalized by the government. And KPMG was the only business, because it was the smallest, that had not been. We weren't holding the baby when everything went wrong. So we won the ability to all of the advisory work for the nationalization process of these two big banks, and then we went on to become the auditor of one of them. We actually won both for audits, but there was a conflict of interest prevented us doing one of them. And overnight we went from being the smallest to being the largest. And
Wow.
and it was really an accident of good fortune. I had a great boss there who was also a financial services person, who kind of really led on a lot of the advisory work that we did there. And then we picked up these audits and we went forward. And as a result of that, I kind of came to the attention of the Moscow firm. It's all one firm, even though it's different countries. And the managing partner, the CFO, was leaving to go back. He was finished. He was going back to Finland. And I said, they said, "Do you want to come up and to take this role?" And I said, "Boy, I'd love to do that." Yeah. So I then went up, and from that CFO role developed into kind of effectively running the operations of that Russian, well, the Russia and CIS businesses, I then went on to become the managing partner for Kazakhstan and Central Asia, with a kind of oversight of the Caucasus as well. So it was a little bit of good fortune, but that it kind of been led by global clients and career opportunities. That's taken me all around the world.
I can say it's probably was not only a good fortune, but also hard work, probably. Yeah, because you have to work a lot to become a managing partner.
There was a little bit of hard work in there as well. Yeah.
So, just to summarize, you've been living in Brazil, Korea, Thailand, Kazakhstan, Russia,
Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. Wow, 6 countries. And eventually in Portugal, yeah?
Yes.
So, and the UK. So 8 countries in total. Wow. Probably not everyone has even traveled to 8 countries. And you've tried life in different cultures. I can say completely different cultures, because probably Brazilian culture, Russian culture, Asian culture are way too different. So how could you navigate the culture differences?
Well, I think probably this my starting point is that I've learned that doesn't matter which country you live in. There are obviously lots of cultural differences. Cultures have grown up over thousands of years, and that brings certain behaviors, of course. But the crucial thing for me is that people are people everywhere. And I think you have the same proportions of good people and bad people, if you want to put it that way, a bell curve of people who, you know, you have the same proportion of angels as you have devils, I guess, and on each end of the bell curve. So once I understood that, then the rest is about trying to understand the cultural indicators that help you to know who are the good people and who are the bad people, and also to, by understanding the cultural indicators, to not inadvertently or by mistake cause offences that you need not cause. And then, of course, that also then makes it far easier to get things done in a professional environment. So, yeah.
It's a really interesting term, cultural indicators, because I've never heard it before. I've heard about culture code and this stuff. So can you make an example of cultural indicators? For example, let's say Russians. It's easier for me to understand.
I was going to go with Thai people as an obvious
Oh, you
one.
can make Thai people as an example. Yeah, it's also fine.
So in Thai culture, then it being polite is absolutely essential. So there's no shouting. Very, very rarely is there any kind of shouting or anything like that. If there's a disagreement, it tends to be quite a quietly spoken disagreement. And that can translate into a certain indirectness where instead of saying something very explicit, particularly if you're taking a contrary view to somebody, you might not say I disagree. You might say I agree, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
Which can then, if you're not clued into those cultural indicators, that can then make it quite difficult to understand what you're supposed to do in that situation. And so you then learn to seek clarification, to offer alternative possibilities, so that the often more senior person has an ability to then make their point or accept that perhaps they made a mistake without them losing face, which is, again, a very important element of their culture in a kind of senior hierarchical culture like Thailand. So that was one learning, or one example of a cultural indicator.
But still, at the end of the day, you understand that all people are more or less the same, yeah? As you said, devils and angels, good and bad people.
Yeah.
So at some point, you just need to be good, and it will help you to adapt to any culture, right?
Well, I've found that that there are lots of, I guess, strategies that you can take, but one of the key ones that I've found over the years, different cultures, is if you walk into a room with an open heart and a big smile, it's very rarely impossible to resolve a conflict or a difficulty.
Definitely. I've heard a lot about this, that when you talk to people with a smile and you talk face to face, it's really difficult for other person to be angry at you, because for a lot of people it's really easy, for example, to grab a phone, call you, and start shouting at you. But when you sitting like face to face, it's much more difficult.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Yeah, but have you ever got in trouble because of some culture differences?
Yes, I think it's impossible to live for almost 20 years overseas and not get it wrong sometimes, because you are a stranger in someone else's country. You can read all the books, you can talk to everyone, you can observe behavior, but you are not from that country. So you will get it wrong from time to time. And yeah, I can think of one time, not my proudest moment, but in Korea, which is probably for me was from a cultural standpoint, probably the most alien culture compared to the West that I lived in. I think Northeast Asia is even for a Westerner harder to comprehend than Southeast Asia. When I left Korea, I left my house that I was renting and had a great relationship with my landlord, and then he wanted to charge me some money for a plant that I hadn't done anything wrong with, and a combination of the pressure of moving and all sorts of things, I really lost my temper, which I'm not proud of. But actually, I then spoke to my firm who helped me to resolve it. So the KPMG guys helped me to fix it, and they explained, look, they said this is just a standard thing, that it's a normal and expected cost of leaving, that some small thing will be picked and you'll pay a small amount of money, and that's actually just how the rental market works. And it's not that this guy's a bad guy, and he'll have been really surprised at how you reacted. So I kind of apologized and everything, but I think I'd rather spoil that relationship by then.
Yeah, but it's a small issue.
It was a small issue, but illustrative of it, you can't know everything, and you can't know how to react to everything.
Yeah, it just doesn't know all the traditions which can be into the country.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I guess every country is unique. Every country has its own perspective and advantages and disadvantages. But which country you liked most?
Now, that is a question I'm asked often, but it's an extremely difficult question to answer. And the reason it's difficult is because of the passage of time. You're at a different stage in every country that you live in by definition. So when I moved to Brazil, my wife and I moved out there together. We were mid-late 20s, great disposable income, living in Sao Paulo, which is not a beautiful city, but is a great fun city to be in. And so we had a real work hard, play hard couple of years, and then we had the great good fortune that my wife fell pregnant, and our first daughter was born in Brazil. So there's a lot of happy memories tied up with that whole period, because we had a kind of a great fun wild time, and then we had our daughter. Hong Kong, my second daughter was born, which was a very happy experience. But we already had one kid, so you're doing different things than than the time in Sao Paulo. In Thailand, it was lovely because the Thai people are so kind and gentle with children, and particularly small blonde children, which are a nice novelty for them. So everywhere that our kids went, they were treated just beautifully, and they always had tens of people picking them up and looking after them and popping sweets in their mouths and all sorts of things. And then in Korea, I also became, during this time, I was becoming a partner, and the workload was increasing, etc. And so in Korea as well, it was a busy time. But my third daughter was born there, and then in Kazakhstan, setting up a financial services practice in a in the old Soviet Union, again, brought a different set of challenges. And also one more daughter in Kazakhstan, and then in Moscow, participating in the senior management of a really good-sized multinational business, a business that's in 20 offices in 7 countries, was I'd never done that before. It was a super challenge, and again the workload ramped right back up again. I was traveling backwards and forwards to Central Asia from Moscow because of the managing partner role there. So it's really difficult to pick one. That said, I have got a clear favourite, and that was actually Moscow.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to hear it.
I don't change that according to the nationality of the interviewer, by the way.
Yeah. Okay, but you were in Moscow from 2008, yeah, if I counted correctly.
So I was in Kazakhstan from 2008 to 2011, and then I moved up to Moscow 2011 to 2016.
Yeah, probably it was the best period, because I moved to Moscow in 2010 myself, and I was still a student, and by the way, I had internship at KPMG in 2011.
Yeah.
Probably we somehow could meet, but we
Maybe
haven't.
we did. Maybe in the
Yeah,
elevator.
maybe we didn't. Yeah, but it was the greatest period for the country because everything was really growing and increasing, and the life was really prosperous. Yeah, yeah. So it was a good period. And you have 4 daughters,
Yes.
right? 4 daughters.
That's right.
All of them were born in different countries.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Did it somehow affect their point of view onto the world, changed something in their mindset? So can you tell a bit about that?
No, absolutely. I mean, the 2 older ones grew up overseas until they were. The eldest was 13, and the younger of them was 11. So that's really formative years. And the 2 younger ones actually both went to Russian state kindergarten, actually, before we moved back to the UK. But they were much younger. They were kind of 5 and 3 when we moved back to the UK. So it was that's the impact on the 2 younger ones has been far less, and the 2 older ones far more. And it's almost like quite a nice social experiment because you've got 2 overseas kids and 2 who've pretty much grown up in the UK. And the 2 overseas ones, they've definitely learned some life skills from moving a lot and leaving their friends and starting in a new country and everything different. So they're very adaptable. They're very good at making friends very quickly. They love foreign cultures. They love different cultures. They love languages. One speaks Japanese, another speaks reasonable Russian.
Very good Russian, I would
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yoda speaks amazing Russian.
Yeah, and so they're very plugged into that like thinking of the world as somewhere that their curiosity can take them, and they have a life of exploring that ahead of them. The 2 younger ones had a very stable schooling after their Russian kindergarten experience. They were in one school and then one other school, so they went all the way through the same elementary school together. And but because of our family background, they are also extremely interested in languages, etc. So one of them studies Portuguese now, another studies French, and so they've also got that curiosity, but they've I think benefited from the stability of being in one place and playing the same sports and having the same curriculum has made their lives probably a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm. But it's still very interesting that this social experiment you're telling about how children are different, after to lived in different cultures in different countries and to benefit from stability. I guess both options they can exist, and it's very important at some point to be stable, but on the other hand it's also very good when your life is constantly changing, because it prepares you for the challenges we face into the world these days. And you said you had a huge workload at some point, and probably you always had a huge workload in comparison to people who just go to work from 9 to 5, And how could you navigate between your work life and your family life? Did you have this work-life balance, or you didn't?
This is a phrase that I didn't learn until more recently, but actually have realized I've applied all of my life, or all my work life, certainly since I lived in Brazil, which is, for me, it's not about work-life balance, it's about work-life blend, because I think my work has always been a very important element of my life. It matters to me. I don't see it as a chore. I see it as something that is just fundamentally a piece of what I do. So for me, it's not about balancing the two. It's about blending the two so that they can coexist in harmony together. So that said, there have been some really challenging times, particularly when I worked in audit, which has a very, very peak season in the first 2 or 3 months of the year, calendar months of the year, because of all the 31st December financial year ends for public companies. A lot of the work is just telescoped into this short period. So, for example, in Kazakhstan, one year I worked 66 days without a day off, and typically, somewhere between 12 and 16 hours each day. In Thailand, based off my timesheets during the whole period I was there, I worked an average 16-hour day, excluding the weekends. So, the big four, they extract their pound of flesh, and then all you can do outside of that is to, when you're not there at work, is to make sure you're very, very present with the family. And I absolutely love my family. I love spending time with them. I love small kids. It was for me. It's never a chore looking after children. It was a pleasure. That was the balance between my work life and my home life, which allowed for this blend. So you have to make sacrifices in this, if to do that. And I made the choice to basically cut back my hobbies. So there was much less individual time for me. I used to play a lot of golf. I don't play golf really very much anymore. I spend time with the family instead. And also, it's really important to recognize, I could not have done any of this if it were not for the nature of my wonderful wife. So
she's a hero, definitely.
She has very broad shoulders, and she's also very independent and very, very capable to pick things up by herself and make sure that the family unit is not adversely impacted by slightly workaholic tendencies.
So the main advice is to find the right woman. It's the number one rule, yeah.
Yeah, I think your partner is absolutely essential. I hope that my four daughters all find the right partners, and that they work out how to split up their time in a way that works for them, because that makes all the difference.
Yeah, I guess we can even make a separate interview with your wife about how she could manage all of this. Yeah,
very different perspective.
Yeah, definitely very different perspective. Yeah, but she's a real hero that she could bear all this burden with moving a lot. Yeah, with your workload. It's really amazing, and you both brought up such great kids. It's a huge work.
Yeah.
It's a huge work. But cutting your hobbies, it sometimes may be difficult for a person.
Yeah.
But as you say, if your job was your hobby also, it's some kind of, it's probably very easier. But I want to dive deeper into your KPMG experience. Yeah, when I had an internship in KPMG, around 70% of people I talked to, they were saying like, we will work at KPMG for some short period of time.
Yep.
And after that, we will move to a better place with a better salary, with better everything. So for them, it was just some line at their CV. And you stick to KPMG for 12 years, right? Around 12 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe even
around,
longer.
Yeah. So what made you to stay for so long? Yeah. What was driving you for so long?
It was very stimulating. So it's hard work, yes. I can understand why people come and they want to stay for a short period of time. You need a lot of resilience. You have to work very hard. The hours are punishing. Not everybody wants that. They maybe want to kind of move into a finance team or something like that, or move on to the entrepreneurial route. Some of them will go, I'm sure, as well. So I can understand why people come in. They want the CV, they want the experience. It's a great training. So 2, 3, 4 years, and then you go and do something else, and you've got that in the bank behind you. I think that's really smart, and I think that the big four recognise that's what a lot of people want to do, which is why they have very high churn levels and why they hire so many people, which is again really helpful for the economy, because they're churning out well-trained people into the economy, which is great. For me, I mean, the flip of it is, for some of these points that might be seen as bad points, there are also good points. Yes, you have to work long hours, but with that comes a kind of camaraderie that you get from being in the trenches together and fighting the corporate fight, and you get a tremendous amount of satisfaction out of delivering really good quality work for very demanding clients. So one of the downsides, of course, is clients can be very difficult, but they're not really being difficult. They're just being demanding. They're paying a lot of money. They want a good service. you get a lot of satisfaction out of doing that. And of course, you're surrounded by really clever people. You're surrounded by super intelligent people all the time. And that is exceptionally stimulating. And you're solving difficult problems all the time. And that's also really rewarding. So it's not for everyone. But I mean, if I were being absolutely honest, I'm an opportunist, and opportunities fell into my lap. I sought them out, but they came to me. I was lucky. So very few people move around the way that I did in the Big Four, because they're franchises rather than multinationals. So every time you move country, you're changing your company and starting from scratch again. So it's quite difficult to arrange to do that. And then it was only when I got to Kazakhstan, where it was in the same partnership, moving to Moscow, that I didn't have that. But the global clients were needing to be served. I was willing and able and in the right place to do that, so I had a bit of luck.
So to sum up, the main reasons were people, and friendships you made during your career. The second was challenges, that it was really interesting to solve different challenges.
Yeah.
And the third one, it was the opportunities, which the KPMG opened up for you.
Absolutely. It's an amazing business. I really enjoyed working for them.
But what was the most difficult challenge you faced while you were working at KPMG? Was it maybe the workload or irregular hours, or maybe something else?
That's a really difficult question. I think probably the hardest thing about these large partnerships is that they're very competitive places. So you don't always get the best behavior from the partners themselves. So dealing with what I would term poor non-collegiate behavior in a very competitive environment, you learn some skills about how to handle that.
I call it Game of Thrones. Yeah, I like this book and TV series. Yeah,
very good comparison.
Yeah. So it was the biggest challenge was navigating between people. Yeah.
I mean, I was also at KPMG in Kazakhstan and Russia during quite a challenging set of geopolitical activities. So I was 2008 to 2016 in the CIS, and during that period you had the financial crisis, you had the annexation of Crimea.
Yeah, we had a lot of
there
stuff.
There was the bloody revolution in Kyrgyzstan. There was the beginning of the civil war that then developed into the full war in East Ukraine. So managing through that was extremely challenging, because I was quite intricately involved in what the firm was doing, because we had offices in all these places, including Bishkek, including Donetsk. So that was probably the biggest external challenge, the geopolitics of the region that we were in.
Yeah, so you've seen all the historical events which happened in the probably last 2 decades, because you were in all of these countries, yeah?
I've seen them quite close.
Yeah, quite close. Can't even imagine how close. Yeah. And, these days I meet more and more young people, especially here in London, who start their business right after the university or even during their university years, because I talked to a few students in different schools here, and they said, well, we have a startup and we want to make our own business. And from your perspective, is there any ideal formula for a startupper? Is it better to work for a huge company like KPMG, as you made it, or it's better to start your own business, fail, then start a new one, fail, and then repeat and repeat?
Well, I think probably the first thing is to observe there's no right way. That, life is life, business is business, and everyone finds their way. There's no doubt that having some business experience can be a big benefit. And a lot of entrepreneurs would benefit from having more business experience than they perhaps do because they've gone straight into things after university or even before. My business partner chose not to go to university. He just wanted to get going. So you definitely benefit from that. But the flip of that is that the type of person who is driven to start a business is probably not going to get along very well with corporate life. It's going to be painful for them because they're going to have to submit to things they don't like. Large businesses they carry an element of inefficiency about them. That's very frustrating to somebody whose life objective is to spot inefficiencies and fix them and make them better. So that it might come down to the type of person you are, makes it quite difficult. For me personally, I have mixed feelings about my own career. I've definitely benefited from a business understanding and experience perspective by having gone to KPMG. It's taught me a lot of things. Part of which was just the passage of times, which you would pick up anyway, but part was very structured and very trained. So that was great. But equally, if my father had not been an accountant, would I ever have done that? Probably not. I had entrepreneurial leanings from the very beginning, and was talked out of it by my father and talked into going the accountancy and professional route. And he very much talked me into that on the balance of risk, and he was more risk averse than I am. And so I think I might have been better served being encouraged to go the entrepreneurial route, knowing that I had someone in the background like my father to help me with the bits I couldn't do. And that's the other point for the entrepreneurs who start early. You can always put people around you. You can always assemble the right people around you to help you fill the gaps you don't have. So I'm not sure that getting that business experience is an absolute essential. I do think it can be helpful. But equally, I don't think it's a problem if you've got the right mindset and you can find the right people to put around you. You can probably manage through that.
Mm-hmm. So it all depends on the personality, your mindset, and the right people.
Yeah. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs who don't succeed the first time, often it's because they've not chosen the right people to put around them.
Yeah.
Rather than the idea was bad, or they're not working hard, or the market wasn't right. Actually, so much of it's 90% of businesses is the people.
Yeah, people is always an issue, I guess. In probably 70% of the business failures, it's usually because partners didn't get along well. And there is even an expression, I don't know whether you have it in Western culture, but we have in Russian culture that you should never make a business with your friends. Yeah? Yeah. First of all, do you agree with this expression?
I have two views on it. I think that if you make business with a good friend and you do it in a careful and transparent way, that it can be very beneficial. But by introducing finances into an equation, then you do potentially put friendship at risk. So if there's any questions over how the financial aspects are structured, that could create tensions. For me, I came at it in a slightly different way. I didn't know Tom. I was introduced to Tom when I was looking for investments to make, not as an entrepreneur, but as an angel investor. And we then ended up, because of that period of time after I invested into Credit Improver, and I was working full time helping Tom. He was very much the founder. I was very much assisting him. But during that period, we became very good friends, and then went into business together. And so far, so good. So I can't be completely against it.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's very good. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this topic. I know that we probably haven't discussed it prior to our interview, but maybe you can share some formula, how to both be friends and be a good partners, how to preserve this balance in the relationships.
Well, I think everyone will do it differently, but for me, the things that matter are so there's transparency, there's communication, and there's openness, which is slightly different. So openness and honesty. So if you get all of that right, then you can get the last piece right, which is alignment. So no two individuals, no matter how close, no husband and wife, no partners are ever 100% aligned. No two individuals can be. There's always an element of self, but you can be very closely aligned. And if you, not all business partners have to be perfectly closely aligned. You can have some slight differences, but you have to acknowledge them. So you have to kind of sit down, look each other in the eye and say, this is what one of the things you're looking for. This is one of the things I'm looking for. There will be points of friction as a result of that. Can we anticipate those points of friction? And when they come, can we sit down and talk them through and look at and analyze the best interests for each party in the course of that? And that probably, so all of those different things leading to alignment and leading to the way that we've found to address that best is to have best interests conversations. So it's very explicitly best interest. It's not about fair. One man's fair is another man's unfair. So it's understanding, in this particular situation, my best interests are served by this. It's not always about money. Best interest can be about emotions. It can be about there can be an element of ego in it. There can be it's important in this case that my ego is served, so therefore I want this outcome. It's important in this situation that my pocket is served, so I want this financial outcome. But laying it out explicitly takes the emotion out of it, and it then becomes, right, a puzzle to be solved. We don't have perfect alignment on this one. Where does each of us compromise our best interests in an acceptable way?
It's very interesting what you describing right now. Reminds me not only relations between business partners, but also relations between a husband and wife. Yeah, so it's pretty the same stuff.
I think it's almost identical.
Yeah. I've actually read a book. I'm trying to remember what was the name of the guy. So he's a business consultant, a very old one in his 80s or 90s right now, and he wrote a lot of books about the business, about the partners, about the company structuring, but at the same time he also had books about the family relations, and I was wondering why. And actually when I started reading, I understood that he's basically writing the same stuff in both books. Yeah, because like the business relations and the family relations, there is no difference in them. Yeah, and back to what we start from, that you said that from this phrase I told you, never make business with friends. You said that you have two different points of view on that. I can also say that probably it's the same with like marriages, why they crash, because people just don't find this balance you're talking about right now. And probably with finding the right balance and the right partner, you can make both like marriages and business even better. You understand the person better if you gonna talk about the hard things with your partner. Your relationships at some point will become better. They will go to another level. So it's a really great insight. You shared. And so after KPMG, you transitioned to a startup world. So it was probably a huge step forward for you, or maybe step aside. I don't know how to say it better. Because I know that for a lot of people it's super difficult to go to startups, because they think we'll go startup, we'll make billions right from the first day, and then their dreams just a little bit not crash. I can say crash. They just become a little bit calm about it, because they understand that everything is not so not so easy. And can you tell a bit about this period, about this transitioning period? What was like the biggest challenges you faced?
Lots of challenges, and I'm smiling because you're right. The definition of an optimist is an entrepreneur is the definition of an optimist, because I heard it said that a McKinsey study shows that 6% of all startups get to $1 million of revenue, 6% of those to $10 million of revenue, and 6% of those to $25 million of revenue. So you have a 0.2% chance, 0.02% chance, I think it is, of building a company that really starts to take off. So by definition, the other 99 point whatever are optimists.
We all know, yeah. About this
and everyone starts off, make billions, buy islands. Yeah, that's the starting point. But no, there is a journey. It's a difficult journey. I know that there's a lot in the UK is being actually done to support founders with mental health challenges, because particularly lone founders, they find it very lonely. I know Tom, who worked on Credit Improver from 2012 to 2016 when we met. He was doing that on his own. He had his family around him, but that was it. But the actual business he was developing himself, it's a lonely road, and so having a partner can really lift the burden there. So what were the challenges? Well, for me, first of all, Loqbox is a financial inclusion business. Our mission is to give everyone access to a richer life. That's to help people to come into the financial system in a safe and secure way, and to create lots of tools to support them while they do that. The reason that we exist is because the regulatory environment in the UK has created a group of people who are in the system and a group of people who are out the system. It's all very well-intentioned regulation, and the idea is to try and protect people from not accessing products that will harm them. But in the course of doing that, they've locked almost a third of UK adults out of the credit that they want. So the credit underserved in the UK is 15 to 17 million people, which is huge. 1/3 of UK adults not accessing the products and services they need. So the difficulty you face coming into that environment is that you're disrupting, in our case, creating an industry, as well as disrupting the existing approach to financial services oversight by the regulator, by the credit reference agencies, the way that lenders lend. That's the part we're disrupting. And in order to disrupt it, we've created an industry, a credit building industry. So we've changed UK financial services, I hope forever, and hopefully for the positive. In doing that, the establishment is massively incentivized to try and stop you because they're conservative. And I completely understand that. There's no individual bad actors, nobody's trying to do bad things, but there's a difference in worldview between what is helping and what is not helping. I completely get that. So facing up to the establishment, having come from a very, very establishment background, was KPMG background, that was a massive challenge. The second thing I would say is credibility. When you start a startup, the startup, it's not even got zero credibility, it's got minus something credibility.
Nobody knows you,
Nobody knows who you are. You're in financial services. How can you trust somebody who's got no track record in financial services? In every single meeting that I was in, I really felt the absence of those 4 big letters behind me, KPMG, where when you walk in, you're at square zero, because there's a recognition that you should be in the room because you've got those 4 letters behind you. So you're actually maybe even square 0.5. But when as a startup, with Loqbox behind us in the early days, we were walking into rooms and people are like, well, why are you here? What are you doing? What's that about? Next challenge I would say was, by definition, a startup has nothing. It starts. So it's always at its point of least sophistication. KPMG was full of more than 100 years of systems and processes and structure and ways of working, etc., etc. So one of the big challenges in a startup is creating structure where it doesn't exist, but creating it when you have very limited resources. So you can't just say, well, we'll hire someone, because you haven't got any money. So how do you hire someone? So then you have to put that in place yourself. And that means that it's often easier just to do something over and over, however inefficient it might be, because you don't have the time to set up the structure to then make it work without you in it. So making the time and finding the time and having the vision and ability to put structure in place is absolutely essential. And then I think probably the biggest adjustment for me was the gut punches. So in every business, big or small, KPMG or otherwise, you know, things go badly wrong. You lose a pitch. You staff walk out on you. A job doesn't work. You know, things happen. The economy turns against you. There's all sorts of things, but there's something just uniquely more painful about being in a startup where you're so small, and then you take a few steps forward, and then something just hammers you in the gut, and you stagger backwards, and you're back earlier than you were before you had the gut punch, you know, or before you even started. And so dealing with that also very, very challenging. You learn, I mean, probably the number one thing you learn is resilience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it's very difficult, like being in a huge company and starting your own. Yeah. Yes, so it was a huge shift, even huger than moving into another country, right?
Way more challenging than moving to another country.
And you talked a lot about these big letters. Yes, they were behind you. But still, did you take some insights, maybe some principles, and brought them to your company, to Loqbox? I mean, did you take anything from KPMG? Yeah, maybe some processes or anything.
Well, I think by osmosis, you know, you work in a place long enough. I worked in the accounting profession from 1994 till 2016. So it's a reasonable amount of time. That's 22 years with a 2-year break working for a bank. You pick up a lot of behaviors that just become natural behaviors. So that comes over with you. So I guess the experience part, it just comes over naturally. I think age plays a part as well. So because just by having been alive, I've seen a lot of things and a lot of behaviors, a lot of situations. And so therefore I'm able to go back to that experience bank and go, does this apply to this? Maybe this bit does. So yeah, and you can use that. So that's been very, very helpful. But experience can also be problematic because, you know, there's a lot of inefficiency in behavior in large companies, as we've kind of already touched on. So you want to get that balance of recognizing which part of experience is helpful and which part is actually going to slow you down, and let the part go that's going to slow you down and focus in on the bits that help. As well as KPMG, I was a board director of several large companies. After I left KPMG, while I was in the early stages of Loqbox, I don't do that anymore. There were a lot of good learnings I got from those companies as well on kind of governance and structure. So that was very useful. But actually, the most enjoyable part has been the bit where you don't bring that experience. You don't bring the stuff from KPMG, but you have the opportunity to, with your business partner, to kind of create something special and new. And we've got a really, really nice culture in Loqbox with very, very low staff turnover. And that's something I think we're both very proud of.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a bit about your culture? What it's based on?
Well, we very, very much have defined a set of values which we live with. They're kind of around communication, around the way you interact, around impact, all the things that matter to us. We talk about them often. So this being the life we're in, I've got my phone here, and my Slack is buzzing as we go, and I've actually literally seen one of the values being quoted in the top of my screen as we've been talking. Impact, one of our values. So they really play an important part in how we do business, and the DNA of the company, and the fact that they are talked about often. The mission is talked about. Can hardly think of a day that's gone past in the last 3 or 4 years where somebody hasn't mentioned our mission. It's that level of embedded, and it's because of the mission that people buy into Loqbox. Because if your mission is financial inclusion, is helping a group of people who cannot participate in the financial system, you really want to help that group, then you have to have a nice culture, because like, how could you not if that's your objective? So you have to be consistent, and probably the number one thing that I've learned over time from a management culture and values perspective is consistency. Equally, probably one of the poorest qualities in poor managers is inconsistency. And so if you've got the framework of values and you're consistent and you're applying them and the mission really matters, you've got a great basis for a great culture.
Mm-hmm. It's really interesting insight that you're talking so much about the mission, because in some startups, people think that the most important thing is the technology, or some kind of supply chain they build, and only probably these days people started talking more and more about a mission and how important it is. And you just talked about it too, and so you think that still the most important thing it's a mission, if you have the right mission, everything else will come together with it.
The mission is the thing that pulls together everything we do. It's the golden thread that joins everything together. From the mission, then we can say, okay, if this is our mission, what are the products and services that we need in order to fulfill that mission? Okay, product guys, that's great. You've got something to work on. With the mission, we've got something to build the tech for, because without the mission, why are we even doing it? For us, the mission is first, last, and always. Which is why I hear it mentioned almost every day, and it's why it matters so much to everyone who joins us. We're not the best pairs in the market. We're not rich enough to be the best pairs. We can't go head to head with Google and Facebook and those guys. So how do we get good quality people? Because we've got people who want to make a difference, and the mission is their way of expressing that in their lives, and it's really important.
Yeah. So you're hiring people who are aligned with your values, right?
Yeah. Totally, yeah. Mm-hmm. And I'd even go as far to say is if that's not you, you will not succeed at Loqbox. You'll leave us quite quickly because you're in it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm. And now, how many people do you have in your company?
We've got around about 130.
About 130. Yeah. And did you notice any changes like in your company when you started? You started only two of you, when it was the beginning,
that's
only
right,
two of you. So how was it? How was this feeling from growing from 2 people to 100 people? During this road, what changed? What was the main changes?
Well, so growing is fun and exciting, but also just as with a human, it comes with pain. So you have your growing pains. So I've already talked about structure. Structure really matters, and the structures that matter when you're 5 people or 10 people are different from the structures and systems and processes that matter when you're 100 people. And so, kind of constantly trying to refit and rework your structure as you're growing quickly, so that your business remains fit for purpose in terms of how people can operate within it. It's super, super, super important. Mm-hmm. So that's probably been the number one thing. The other side, of course, is great fun. You get back to you have lots more clever people around you, lots more interesting conversations, and I'm a great believer in. I can't remember which tech entrepreneur it was, whether it was Steve Jobs or someone equivalent, who says if you're the cleverest guy in the room, you're in the wrong room. So
I guess
really
it was
like
Steve
that.
Jobs, but I'm not sure. Yeah. And was it difficult to keep your mission during this period of growing, or the mission was always the first and you were just building around?
Well, the mission, the words we've used, the fundamental mission hasn't changed, but the words we've used to express it have changed as we've developed a greater understanding of the problem that we're trying to help. So, the understanding you have when you're credit improver and not quite finding product market fit is different from the understanding that you have once you've been working for, we've been going since 2017. So, for seven years we've been doing this. The understanding you have and the way you can articulate it changes. The fundamental mission has not, and I think that's evidence that that the mission itself is sound. Is that we haven't felt, there's never been a need to pivot away from that mission.
Mm-hmm. And the fintech space, where you are in now is quite competitive, highly competitive, especially in the UK, because there
Yeah.
are a lot of services like neobanks, Revolut, and
Yeah.
other guys. And you probably also compete with traditional banks, right? And what makes you different? What makes Loqbox different from every other company?
So two questions there.
Yeah.
The first is like, do we see ourselves as competing with these players? Well, not really. Um, what we're trying to do is fix a broken bit of the system that is preventing these players from serving a large group of UK consumers in a way that everyone would benefit from. The consumers would benefit, the banks would benefit, society as a whole benefits, because you have people who are accessing aspirational credit, and therefore, you know, if you want to take it to a really micro level, you live in a town in the post-industrial north of England. There is no longer any buses that service you to take you to a nearby town or city. There's no work in the town. You need a car if you're going to be economically active, but you don't have enough money to buy a car. You need car finance, but you can't get car finance because you're locked out. If we unlock that aspirational credit, we are creating somebody who is economically active and participating in the workforce and living an aspirational life rather than locked out and having their aspirations destroyed. So we're really working to the benefit of the whole of society, so therefore, once we've helped that person to build their credit history, they're able to then access that credit. In they come, the bank can serve them, they get a job, etc., etc. So we don't see ourselves really as competing. Some may or may not introduce some competitive lines of business. Sure, that's fine. In terms of how do we differentiate, well, we are the oldest. We're the most trusted. We've got the largest number of reviews on Trustpilot and a 4.5 star rating. We've it's difficult to tell because it's not non-transparent industry stats, but we are pretty confident from number of employees, traffic to sites, etc., that we are the largest. So we are, from having first mover advantage, we occupy in this very young industry a kind of incumbent position. That doesn't mean you don't need to differentiate. We're always kind of looking at what's going on in the marketplace, but ultimately, we're in a great position that we introduced a paid for membership in 2021. That allowed us to really get product market fit, and we've seen our growth just really rocket since then. We keep our eye on what all of the competitors are up to, and we build out our feature sets to go into our paid for membership, reacting to all of the sights and sounds of the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. So you somehow could find let's say a blue ocean, yeah, in the fintech market,
Yeah.
where your product fitted. And I've read in one of your interviews, or it was an article, that you also tried to expand for United States, yeah, and it was not so successful as you expected. Can you share a bit of your experience to go outside of the UK to States? What did go not exactly as you wanted?
Let's start with maybe everything. No,
Honest answer.
it was a really interesting exercise and some really interesting learning. So, we first of all we went too early. So we had not. We launched in. So I started our business in the UK in 2017. We launched into the US in January 2020. So timing is everything. So we launched right into the pandemic in the US before we had found proper product market fit in the UK. So we hadn't nailed our own market. We didn't realize that. We were unaware that we had not found product market fit, which maybe sounds silly, but you don't always know that until you know it. So we hadn't found product market fit in the UK. We had we launched into the pandemic, so that meant that we couldn't hire people because we didn't want to hire expensive people in the US without meeting them face to face, and you couldn't travel in the pandemic to the States very easily. So that was really difficult. So we then ended up putting our launched product onto an extended pilot for about a year and a half. And by the time, and that was the third learning, the States is so competitive. When we went into pilot, when we launched, we were the second online credit builder in the US. So there was one called Self, which is still a good business today. When we came out of the extended pilot, there were tens of credit builders, and our moment had passed, the moment to kind of get that second mover advantage and be kind of the known brand had gone past. And then the third thing was the distorting impact of venture capital on the US market. So there was so much capital deployed in 2020 and 2021 to consumer-facing fintechs that the cost of acquisition of every customer rose dramatically because there was some of these some large entities, likes of Chime, big neobank in the States, had $2 billion of capital to deploy and launched a loss-leading credit builder to get people to come into their current account offering. So, use our credit builder, but you have to use our current account sort of thing. And so we were facing that, which just made the cost of acquisition too much. And then the final insult of it all was our main distributor went into Chapter 11. So at that point we said, that was 2022, we said, no, enough, we'll focus on our home market. And that brought real focus. So we also had realised how diluting in focus having two businesses were before we got to the right size with one of them. So altogether, a lot of really, really interesting learnings. There's no bad learning. So it was an expensive learning, but there's no bad learning.
Yeah. But you pay for the experience, yeah? You pay for the knowledge.
You paid for the knowledge.
It's like going to probably some business course, but you tried it a little bit more immersive, with immersive experience, yeah? But the key takeaways that it was just a bad timing and probably not the right market and not enough of the focus, yeah? So you always need to focus on what you're doing. Yeah. And if we go a little bit back to the culture, I wanted to ask this question earlier, but we got into your expansion to the US market. About people, I want to talk a little bit more about people you're hiring, in the Loqbox. How do you understand that the person is right for your company? Should he have some particular set of skills, or you focus more on his cultural fit?
Well, it has to be both. So we take the functional skills as that's entry level. We're very thoughtful about our hiring process. We put a lot of time and effort into it. In a smaller, medium-sized business, that you don't have deep resources, so anybody doing interviews is not doing other work. So it's a deliberate investment into that process. So we'll typically run case studies and various other things, and we'll do for areas where you can test, like tech developers or finance or whatever. We'll actually get people to do tests so we can actually get some test codes that get a kind of test finance case or whatever. So we really check the functional part. If they pass the functional part, the cultural fit, as we've already been talking about, is absolutely essential. So, and we talked about that at some length with the mission and all of that mattering. And so, typically, a member of senior management will take a half hour or an hour interview to talk about the mission and gauge the person's interest and ability to really buy into that.
So if the person doesn't fit culturally, you wouldn't hire him?
No.
Did you have any mistakes in that? For example, you hired a person who has an incredible set of hard skills, but he was not aligned with the culture.
We did in the earlier days before we had such a thoughtful interview process. That happened a few times, and they've all left. They've all left of their own
themselves.
choice.
So
themselves. They've all left themselves because it's not their
fit.
place. That's why I was saying earlier that if you don't buy into the mission, if that doesn't really get you excited, you almost certainly will not succeed with us.
And I want to talk a bit about trends. Yeah, so which trends do you see in the nearest future of fintech and credit building? So, what's gonna be different in the next 5 years?
So financial inclusion is a massive topic of conversation all around the world, but in Britain, particularly in Britain. It's at the top of the regulatory agenda. The CEO of the Financial Conduct Authority, I've read several speeches where he's focusing very much in on financial inclusion being something that the FCA should take great care to try and promote and help. We know that there are big changes in the credit data services industry, the credit reference agencies. So they are the body that oversees them is changing. So they're forming a new body called the Credit Reporting Governance Body, which will be formed in the next year, and that will then take a look at the way that data is collected. So there's big changes going on in there. In terms of industry, that's the regulatory and kind of oversight framework and governance. In terms of like actual trends, well, the two most obvious trends, well, there's three actually. Two are technological and one is structural. So the two technological ones, unsurprisingly, artificial intelligence will play its part because it's playing its part in everything. It's going to play its part in lending decisions as well, I'm absolutely sure. So how that's incorporated into the credit building and credit reporting and the lending decisioning will be a big development, big deal. So that's one. Open banking. Open banking has not been particularly well implemented in the UK. It's because of the requirement to re-authenticate every 90 days means that there's been very, very low adoption rates. And
Can you please a little bit specify what is open banking?
oh yeah, open banking is a set of rules and regulations that allow require banks to show and share data that they have that they have in their own bank, that their own bank has, with other organisations to enable a more open and transparent economy. So, if I've got an account with HSBC and I enable some open banking technology if I activate that, let's say it's for credit scoring and reporting, right? So somebody wants to access the transactions in your bank because they have a credit building proposition, then they will be able to see every transaction that has gone through your bank account, which of course previously was a massive competitive advantage that the banks held it to themselves. And it feels a little bit like it's not hugely in the main bank's interests, open banking, so they have not made it as easy as they might have done because they see it as undermining their competitive position, I believe. They might not say that publicly, but that certainly is how their actions appear to be. But the number one constraint is that there is a regulatory requirement to reauthorize every 90 days, which is a pain. People don't want to do that. And so that's a regulatory requirement that has once again been put in place to protect people, but it's a massive barrier to adoption. So, but you can only assume that these will be overcome these barriers will be overcome over the next 5 to 10 years, and then of course, with access to the entire transactional history, it should be possible to create some really interesting credit building, credit scoring tools. And there are a number of businesses that are already doing that, and one which called Credit Kudos was bought by Apple about a year and a half ago. So there's a lot of development in that area. Traditional credit building, I think there's a place for that for the next 5 years because typically the financial system, when a new data point, like such as open banking enabled data, comes to exist, then they don't usually throw away the old data points. They usually adopt the new ones. So the old data points will still remain valid for some time, I would think. So they're the two technological ones, and the structural one is that for a particular niche group, but it's quite a large group, is, and this will chime, I think, with you having lived overseas, is people who are new to countries cannot bring their credit histories with them, so they are always starting from scratch. And I saw HSBC has just announced that for certain specific countries today, I think they just announced it, that they are allowing people from the US, the UK, the Philippines, various others to port their credit histories with them. And I think if they either that happens or a global credit score, credit history that could be agreed on by some of the main players were to come into existence, that would be a massive development. Lots of barriers to that, of course.
Yeah, because I've never thought about it, but when you live in just one country, you just never thinking about that your credit score can't be transferred anywhere, yeah? And when you move to another country, you understand, wow, I can't even take a loan because because I have zero credit score here. And especially with the rise of digital nomads these days, it's actually kind of difficult for both for the country and for these people. For example, these people, they usually have money and they want to buy some property, but they don't have enough cash to buy a 400,000 euros house, or apartment. But they have around 200,000, but they can't get a mortgage because they don't have any credit scores. They have a job abroad, overseas, and country just doesn't recognize this job. And I know a few people who already face this problem. And I guess this is pretty great market to be in the next 5 years. And I guess it's a great field for new startups to appear, because at some point there will be more and more fintech startups which will be focused on credit rating, credit scores, on somehow combining your international credit score with local and stuff like that.
I think so. I mean, and welcome the innovation, welcome the competition.
Yeah. And what about Loqbox? Are you planning to go overseas at some point, or you want to focus more on UK market?
We're very focused on the UK market for just now. I think that's probably our number one thing. There's a lot of potential in the UK market. We have it on our roadmap to go overseas again, but it's more distant. Our number one focus, having learned the lessons of our United States expansion, is nail the home market.
And what about IPO? Are you planning to go to IPO if it's not a secret, of course? Yes.
Not currently in this marketplace. I think we're probably still a bit too small for an IPO. But also, it's not a great market for IPOs right now. So, honestly, the London Stock Exchange is massively losing its competitive position in the world. Has done for the last 3-4 years. So, it doesn't look as appealing as it might have done 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, and the most appealing is probably still New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah, I mean that has consistently manages to reinvent itself, even with its very, very heavy rules-based SEC oversight.
Yeah, and in conclusion, which advice would you give to a person who want to shift from the corporate world to a startup world?
Do it.
Just do it,
yeah, do it.
Like Nike, just do it.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so that's the silly answer, but I believe it. I think the more nuanced answer is it's for some people, it's not for other people. Like, I think a lot of people are attracted to the idea of I am my own boss, I work my own hours, and blah blah blah, all of that stuff. Which if you're coming off the back of working all night on a project, you might just be thinking
not so glamorous. Not so glamorous.
But the reality is, some people have the mindset and the resilience to do it, and others do not. And if you think that it's in any way going to be less work than working for a corporate, then you're either incredibly lucky or wrong.
It's definitely much more work and much more responsibility.
It's way more responsibility, and particularly now we've got 130 odd people who rely on us.
Yeah. And just brief questions, like the ending brief. Which advice would you give to yourself in 18?
I would say work hard, follow your dreams, and believe in yourself.
Yeah. Pr- Actually, yesterday our guest gave almost the same advice. Yeah, it's really great actually to follow your dreams. Probably the most important thing. Yeah, stick to it. Um, which three books would you recommend to read? Like a must read, which shaped your probably experience, your point of view into the world.
Um, I find this very difficult because I'm an obsessive reader. So I find that inevitably that tends to skew me towards the more current books I've read because I'm getting old and my memory is poor. But I put a lot of thought into this. This was one of the questions you flagged you would ask, and I put a lot of thought into this because I think I love book recommendations, so it matters. I think that it matters to me. First thing is I'm going to disappoint everyone because I don't really get excited by self-help books or books telling me how the best way to do business is or how how to become a millionaire in 5 steps or whatever. For me, I've always been I studied English literature, so for me, literature is the number one go-to thing. And I take a lot out of the way that the themes that come across in fiction. So the first book I've picked is actually an old one. It's one that I read when I was at university, very much in a hippie phase. It's called Jonathan Livingston Seagull. It's
I
by
know this book.
Yeah?
Great one. Yeah.
Oh, so glad to hear that. It's by Richard Bach, and I love it because it's all about it's about a seagull that wants to fly fast. And if you're excited by books like that, read it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But it's actually all about like the aspirations to be more than you are, and to live your best life, and to achieve the maximum you can achieve. And it's beautifully written, and for anyone who is watching this or listening to this who is not a keen reader, it's very short as well.
Yeah, it's really short.
So it's a great book. The second book again, it's one I read about 10 to 15 years ago, but I reread it recently, and that is Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami.
Also know this one, but I haven't read, but I want to.
I'm a big Haruki Murakami fan. I don't think there's a book he's written that I have not enjoyed, and some of them are like 1Q84 have been very influential for me. But what I love about Norwegian Wood is that it's a really beautiful journey through life, loss, and love, and it's. For me, it really helps me to understand some of the real motivating forces in my life. So a lot of what happens in that chimes with me. And the third is one that I read very recently, so definitely biased towards the present, and that is a history by Tom Holland, not Spider-Man, but the professor of history who is very successfully on the Rest is History podcast, which I would recommend to absolutely anyone. And that's his book Dominion, which is about the how Christianity and the rise of Christian values has effectively shaped the entire world that we live in today. It's a fantastic piece of narrative history, which really helps join a lot of the cultural dots in terms of how people behave in an American presidential election, or even in some of the Gulf states, or the politics of sex, etc. in the Gulf states. So that's a real recommend for anyone who has an interest in narrative history. It's just reads like a novel. It's superb.
Great recommendations. Actually, I also find like novels and history books more useful than self-help books, because I've read a lot of self-help, apparently, because it's very popular stuff, but I can just mention a few which are really worth reading.
Yeah.
And others, it's just a lot of words around one simple idea, usually. Yeah. And the last question, it's also a pretty philosophical one, yeah? So what is the greatest place to be geographically in the next 3-5 years? Yeah, maybe a mark because of the market conditions, because of the way of life. Yeah, which one you think is the best?
Well, so everything depends on what your motivations are. So
Yeah.
are you looking to grow a business? Are you start a business, grow a business? Are you looking to make great wealth? Are you interested in living a really good quality of life? All of that kind of matters. And as we were when we were talking about the different countries that which is the best country to live in, everything also depends on your stage of life. I'm in my 50s, with my family growing up. I'd like to be near them, but there's no guarantee where they'll be because they have a very
Yeah.
global perspective.
Because they're growing up and
they're
spreading around the world.
yeah. So for the time being, I actually would choose England for me personally, because the stage of life I'm at, I had never lived in England. I went to university, but I never lived and worked in England post-university until after I moved back here from Russia in 2016. So for me, living in the south of England has been a real journey of discovery, and I've discovered one of the most beautiful countries I've ever lived in. So I really like that. I have a lot of nice friends and family. So England is for me. If you're looking for, I think if you're chasing wealth and you know the opportunity to build things with the kind of best business environment, I think you're looking at some of the super hubs in Asia, or Dubai or whatever, where the regulatory environment is much more freewheeling, gives you so much more latitude to do the things you want to do. I think Western Europe and Britain is very heavily perhaps
Conservative probably at some point.
perhaps over-regulated. I can understand why that's happened, particularly in financial services, because it was very lightly regulated up until the 2008 financial crisis, and the political response to that crisis has been to very heavily regulate and increase the oversight. And I think that's a mistake. It's based on bad data. I don't think that the regulatory environment caused the crisis. I think that there were a bunch of other factors,
other things,
and eventually, I very much hope that the pendulum swings back, because I have a strong view that, having been either the number one or number two financial centre in the world for the last 300 years, I think Britain is going to surrender that position with the way it's currently regulated, and those regulations are overseen. So I think that's a real shame, because that has been one of the massive drivers of improved quality of life in the UK in the last hundred odd years. So I hope that I wouldn't be necessarily starting a business in fintech or financial services in the UK now, knowing what I know now. The environment is pretty tough.
Mm-hmm. So Asia for going wealthy,
Yeah.
and Europe, UK just for life, yeah, enjoying life. So thank you so much, Greg, for an interesting insight. It was amazing conversation. I personally learned a lot about the career, about life. So thank you so much for your time.
You are most welcome. Thank you very much for having me along.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So it was a nice conversation. Thank you everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed.